Lady B here, and I'm gonna try a different approach than some of the previous videos. It's still kind of like getting used to that flow state, but with a little bit more structure. And also it gives me practice to kind of start, getting with the times and using a tablet to kind of take down some notes and like kind of break things up into bullet points. But I kind of basically was being called to talk about vulnerability, not just vulnerability, but I was like driving and I got like a whole like list of like just different things that were coming to me. But the first and foremost one out of all those was vulnerability, that I felt strongly that I needed to speak on. And yeah, it's definitely something that's not easy to talk about, especially if you have difficulties with vulnerability. Even just kind of communicating, expressing on it might, give some of that vulnerability a challenge. So what is vulnerability? What can that look like? I wrote down some notes here. For me, it looks like communicating and expressing, expressing personal difficulties and challenges. And something like that could be, a little difficult. Maybe on a surface level, you can talk about some things or some basic stressors or, just different various things that, other people kind of deal with. But it can be a little bit more difficult to share with someone, especially on an intimate level, or somebody that, you're really connected with, but you may have a hard time expressing your vulnerability in a certain setting, or even just being able to be vulnerable with yourself. So what does that look like in you being vulnerable, and being able to try to express that and communicate that? And there's a few things that can kind of play into this. I would say trust is a huge major component, and then I also put down unconditional love. So to me, in the combination of trust and unconditional love, it's something that starts with you, and if you don't have that for yourself, you can't get that for someone else. So inherently, if we're not able to trust and have unconditional love, we're so scared of being able to be vulnerable with someone, due to the unknown, that we don't know that it's going to be, a positive thing or something negative and thrown back at us. Actually, I have a definition from verywellmind.com. They did a pretty good job, I feel like, defining vulnerability, and I'll put the link below so you guys can access it if you want to learn more on fear of vulnerability. But they defined it as a state of emotional exposure that comes with a degree of uncertainty. So that's where that kind of trust comes into play, is that degree of uncertainty. You don't know how the other person's going to react. And the unconditional love part for me that I'm adding in, that's a component of being vulnerable, because can you be able to express your vulnerability and your personal difficulties and challenges, whatever that might be, and that could be in the form of pains and sufferings and traumas, experiences, even things that you regret or ashamed of or guilty, resentments, grudges, just kind of that spectrum of negative energy, in different circumstances or situations that led to those occurrences. But being able to have unconditional love, to me, is also meaning, you're able to be vulnerable with someone, not knowing how they're going to react, and even if they react bad, still hold space for them to do that and be human, where they're at, because they don't necessarily understand what you're going through, and not allow it to affect your ability to continue being vulnerable, or to feel safe in expressing and communicating. And that's something that's extremely difficult. You communicate to something really personal to someone and they don't react or respond in the way that you expect. It can be kind of jarring, and you can have a knee-jerk reaction as a response as well, and your feelings can get hurt, or all kinds of different things, right? But our personal responsibility is to take into fact how we respond or react to things. And if you allow more awareness into your life, and if you can develop that trust and unconditional love, you'll be able to kind of meet people where they're at and understand that they're responding from their place of whatever it is that maybe something you said triggered them to react the way they did, or they have their own experiences that they're trying to make sense of that they don't quite make sense of, and something you said sparked some kind of emotion and reaction, knee-jerk reaction. and then giving them that room to go ahead and do that and not let it affect you. That's your responsibility. Don't let their reaction or response, whether it be negative or positive, affect you adversely in any way. Now, if it's something positive, dwell in that positivity, share in that communion, and grow in that. But the negative, we don't need to dwell on that, and we don't need to allow anybody else's response or reaction to us sharing something that is personal and deep, or something that is hurt and pain, and bearing our soul in whatever way, in whatever response would get met with that. Don't be scared, and be able to trust that whatever it is, you still know who you are, right? And that's that developing of trust and unconditional love for yourself. You trust in you and who you are, and your unconditional love for yourself, to know that you know your own journey the best. No one else can tell you otherwise. No matter how any other person reacts, you're still in control of your journey, your emotions, your responses. And you can continue to choose to not knee-jerk react, or recognize when you do, and take responsibility and take action after a knee-jerk reaction, to kind of change that or challenge yourself to grow from that. See some other more points. I'm trying to be more structured, you guys, I swear. So emotional vulnerability, a state of emotional exposure that comes with degree of uncertainty. Learning how to be vulnerable involves a willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to love and be loved. So that's another thing that's from that website, theverywellmind.com. There's quite a few little handy dandy things on there. And I think that's something that's really important is for us to learn how to be vulnerable, and that willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open and willing to be open to be loved and to love, right? And that's something it's a very give and take, not just take, not just give. A lot of us don't have very good boundaries with that. So not having those boundaries and going to something like emotional vulnerability could be very confusing and scary, right? So that willingness is, in spite of whatever situation may be, you're still willing to take that emotional risk. It's a risk because you don't know, it's uncertain, and you have no idea how the response might be. But you're willing to take that emotional risk and put yourself out there in such a way that you could get seriously hurt by exposing whatever truth of your soul or pain, and something that's not easy to share with someone, and be met with a completely inappropriate response by your feelings. But again, your feelings are in your control, and no matter what anyone else has to say, even if they hurt your feelings, just meet them with where they're at. That's their projection, or that's they got going on with themselves. And just because that situation happens, however many times that when you're vulnerable, you don't have to just shut yourself away from vulnerability off the bat. Never moving forward, never going to talk to nobody about no shit. Y'all ain't gonna know shit, I ain't gonna say nothing, no one gonna help me with me. But we do need that support, and we do need to share in that, and that vulnerability is something that is I think integral to the interactions between humans and dynamics that we share together. So it is something that can be difficult to take steps in when you come from certain backgrounds. Like myself, it's extremely difficult. I have a hard time just to be vulnerable with me. So that, to me, being vulnerable is that ability to seek support in the lowest moments. And instead of choosing the isolating behavior. So our go-to comfort, our tool that is no longer serving us is that going straight to the isolation. And you know what? No, I'm gonna shut down here, build this wall. Y'all ain't gonna cross it. I'm not gonna be vulnerable. I'm not gonna get hurt. That's the easy thing to do, right? It's the go-to, it's the comfort zone. It's what we know that works. However, that doesn't really suit your best, highest, potential, right? We have to be able to be vulnerable to start working through some of the shit, and to be able to move forward in it. So that's something that could be a block and limiting, and even though it's protecting you and it's saving your ego, it's not really for your highest good. It's not servicing the purpose of growth. Ooh, it's gonna fall. I have this taped up to my light, and it is little bit struggling there to stay. So I'm still pretty new at this, you guys. Bear with me, and we'll get right back to it in just a moment. Stay. Okay, so why do we isolate? You know, we isolate to protect ourselves from the wreckage and the fallout of that emotional risk. You know, we're taking that risk. We don't know how it's going to work out, and then it works out for the worst, like we kind of thought or anticipated, because that's what we're used to. And that those feelings being hurt, which when I say that, it's so much more deeper than that, right? There's a lot that goes into that, but you know, just on a general level, the injustice done to, you know, our emotions not being heard, understood, or felt, you know, in whatever type of way, and having shared that with someone, you know, kind of expecting some type of understanding or perception, you know, balance there, and not receiving that, we get in our feelings about it. We get, you know, we feel like we can't turn to anyone. We feel alone, you know, and we get into such a place within ourselves that we, you know, shut down, and we're just like, no, I can't share this with anyone. Like, this is, look at the result, the pain, the suffering, and boom, what happens? Step right in, ego mind, protect thyself, you know, from that emotional wreckage and damage, versus recognizing for what it is, accepting, feeling, releasing, allowing, you know, yourself to process that, and then understand, and from that unconditional loving point, give people the space to be human and know and understand from that kind of higher level perspective that you can't control how they're going to respond, perceive, or receive, and they're going to do it from their own set of blocks, their own emotional, you know, traumas and things and stresses, you know, whatever it is, across the spectrum, right? That's what they're receiving through their own lens, and they can't always get what you're saying in the way that you want them to receive it, right? But just know and trust that you know what it is, and even if they don't receive it right, you can still choose to be emotionally vulnerable, and you know, those of who are, you know, the most supportive will be receiving it in the right ways, and you can learn to identify, you know, those type of people in your life that you can go to and have that kind of trusted, heartfelt, whatever conversation, and be able to be vulnerable and not shunned away or shut down or made to feel any specific way about your emotions. So that's really key. How emotional availability and vulnerability can be affected by societal expectations of masculine and feminine energy. So this is something I wrote down because I did want to go into a little bit how those energies play a role. In our society, we say masculine energy is not allowed to be vulnerable. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to be emotional. And so emotional availability and emotional vulnerability, right? That emotional availability, being able to be there with someone through emotions, talk and have conversations about those kind of, you know, deep, random things, is not something that is taught to men to be acceptable to partake in. You know, so they turn away. And when I say men, I mean masculine energy, right? Whatever masculine energy, you know, whatever form that might take, is not allowed. Masculine energy is shut down away from what is considered the feminine energy and the intuitive of, you know, being open and communicative and vulnerable, emotional, you know, these things, right? But it's very much yin and yang, and each individual is yin and yang. We have both energies, right? Whatever balance of those energies that you have is your own unique balance, but we have to still, you know, allow ourselves to be emotionally vulnerable and emotionally available regardless of whatever energy you're most dominant in. And that is just something for people to keep in mind and be aware of, you know, because maybe some people don't realize that societal expectation and role plays into our perceptions. And so there's a greater difficulty for those in the masculine energies to be able to express, communicate, and be emotional and have that emotional vulnerability. So there's like an additional wall there that's not really present so much so in the female energies. The feminine energy expression, it's, you know, allowed, it's expected. But, you know, it also goes like a little bit on the other end, right? Sometimes, you know, the feminine energies are a little bit dismissed and put down because, oh, they're just so emotional, or this, that, and the other, you know, it's exaggerated and it's made to look, you know, down upon. So there's kind of pros and cons to both, but that's why we need to find a balance, and we need to start teaching our society that it's okay that we're both energies, first of all. Second of all, everyone needs to be able to have emotion and be able to communicate and express it in healthy ways. And that's not something that we're learning. At least that's not something that we were learning when I was in school. I'm a little bit older now, so maybe they are teaching in schools. I don't know, but this is something that we do need to bring more awareness to. So that brings me to, you know, how do you begin your journey of vulnerability? You know, and that's something that I kind of spoke a little bit just a few moments ago, but you know, kind of starting with you, with that self-trust and self-unconditional love, because once you kind of have that, you have a strong foundation to be able to start sharing with others and being in that community with other people, regardless of whether, you know, they're in the right frequency or not. And if they're not, you understand where they're at in their life. You can understand and feel, and you know, even be supportive to them and their own projection, and kind of let go what it is that you got going on, and not allow it to make you turn to isolation as your coping mechanism in the future. Like, well, you know, they didn't get it, so my go-to is never fucking talk to nobody ever again about shit. Y'all ain't gonna know shit. No, you gotta refrain from those, you know, just 100%, you know, gas pedal to the metal, just flipping, put up the wall. You know, don't allow yourself to kind of get into those traps, because just keep an open mind for growth. You know, you want to have room for other potentials, and don't limit yourself to just one solution. And if you find yourself doing that, just, you know, kind of look for other solutions, and know that maybe it's a little unhealthy if you're just all the way max and you're like, yep, never again, never gonna talk to nobody, fuck everyone, and you know, they're never gonna know that vulnerable emotional side of me because they don't deserve to know, or whatever, the hate, the anger for the world, and in the way you've been treated. Don't let that weigh you down and keep you back. And so yeah, so start with you. Start on that journey of unconditional love for yourself, how to trust yourself, you know what I mean, and forgive yourself for whatever it is, and things that you did and were in control of, and things that were not in your control that happened to you. You know, you got to be able to forgive yourself. There's a lot of healing there. And so release of pain, I would say start with the closest friends and family, like the ones that you know are gonna be able to receive it a little bit better, so that way you can kind of bridge this gap in terms of your emotional safety being at risk. Like, if the people that you know are gonna respond generally pretty well, you know, relatively in a good way, in a supportive way, you start with them so you can build that safety and support, and you know, that group, that network, and then you can kind of grow and expand upon that, and just be a little bit more vulnerable in your everyday life, or just with the people that you want to be vulnerable with but you have difficulty, right? Like, I'm in a relationship, and you know, I haven't been in one for a long time, so that's something that I have extreme difficulty to be able to maintain that emotional vulnerability, because I have great difficulty with allowing myself to feel the things that I don't want to feel. That's why I was very much a workaholic, so I could just work, not have to feel shit, and not have to deal and process with that pain, that suffering, you know, the generational trauma. I like just push it away, lock it away. It's good, just keep burying it, right? But that's not healthy. That doesn't help me grow through it. It doesn't help me, you know, really release it or process it, right? So it just keeps sitting there boiling, you know, and just fermenting and getting worse and worse and worse. So that's something that I'm currently on a journey of, is, you know, learning how to build that emotional vulnerability and do it in a way that I can feel safe to be able to talk about the personal things, and in spite of whatever reaction and, you know, unknown certainty of response that I might receive, be okay with me and who I am, and know that if it's not met and well received, that's, you know, it's just a strong indication of that person needing support as well. And maybe they just need to be heard too. So if you're able to kind of put yourself in a grounded place, and, you know, shut away all the aspects that keep you from just being a human to human, you know, experience, then you can kind of see and relate to where they're at, you know, like, hey, I might have been there in one place myself as well, and put aside differences to be able to feel okay. And that's what's most important, is you're feeling inside, right? You're not allowing what's out here and whatever knee-jerk response this is to affect this, and how this continues, you know, going about in the world and perceiving and relating to others, and, you know, giving, like expressing and communicating, as well as receiving, right? So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. I really hope this brings some kind of awareness or help, or, you know, people just enjoy these videos. I have difficulty with maintaining consistency, so I'm trying to work on that, but again, it's also because that vulnerability thing, like, I'm working on, so I'm not quite comfortable with being vulnerable and kind of putting yourself out there on YouTube, you're really being a little bit vulnerable, you know, and so some of those feelings and things that are involved. But I do enjoy, you know, getting into the flow state and kind of feeling called, you know, to speak on certain things or just provide just awareness, you know, and giving that and sharing that, you know, however which way it turns out to be. So if you do like it, you know, please like, share, subscribe, and comment if you want to create a conversation. We can delve more into it. And once again, I'll put the link to the one website that was defining the emotional vulnerability, which I really love, that a state of emotional exposure that comes with a degree of uncertainty. They had a lot of good information on there for fear of vulnerability if you're interested to learn more. I hope y'all have a great day, and I'll see you soon.